Christmas Eve, 1945, Fayetteville, West Virginia. The Sodder family was celebrating the holiday. 10 children, 2 parents, a house full of joy and laughter. Around 1 a.m., the house caught fire. The family woke up to smoke and flames. They ran outside. 9 people escaped, but 5 children were still inside. Maurice, age 14. Martha, age 12. Louis, age 9. Jennie, age 8. Betty, age 5. The parents tried to go back in. The stairs had already burned. George Sodder tried to get his truck to drive it under the window and climb up. The truck wouldn't start. It had worked perfectly hours earlier. He tried to get his ladder. It was gone. Someone had taken it. The fire department was called, but they didn't arrive for 7 hours. 7 hours. By morning, the house was ash. The fire chief said the 5 children died in the fire. Their bodies were cremated by the intense heat. But George and Jennie Sodder didn't believe it, because house fires don't cremate bodies, and the fire had only burned for 45 minutes. Their children had vanished, and they would spend the next 42 years searching. George and Jennie Sodder were Italian immigrants. They came to America in the early 1900s seeking a better life. They worked hard. They had 10 children. They built a successful trucking business in Fayetteville, West Virginia. George was outspoken. He criticized Mussolini and Italian fascism. This made him enemies in the Italian-American community. Some people called him a traitor. In the months before the fire, strange things happened. A life insurance salesman came to their house. George refused to buy insurance. The man got angry. He pointed to George's house and said, "Your house is going up in smoke, and your children are going to be destroyed." 2 months before Christmas, someone tried to cut the Sodders' telephone line. A few weeks before Christmas, a strange man watched the children playing in the yard. One of the older daughters asked him what he wanted. He pointed at the 2 youngest girls and said, "Beautiful children, beautiful. A pity they'll be gone soon." George dismissed these incidents, but after the fire, he remembered everything. December 24, 1945, Christmas Eve. The Sodder family went to bed around 10 p.m. Most of the children were already asleep. The 2 oldest daughters, Marion and Sylvia, stayed up late with some friends. They went to bed around 12:30 a.m. Around 1 a.m., Jennie Sodder woke up. She smelled smoke. She saw flames in George's office downstairs. She screamed. The family woke up. George, Jennie, and 4 children escaped through the front door. Marion and Sylvia escaped from upstairs windows. But 5 children were trapped upstairs: Maurice, Martha, Louis, Jennie Jr., and Betty. George tried to go back in through the stairs. They had already collapsed in flames. He ran outside to get his truck. He planned to drive it under the upstairs windows so the children could jump onto the roof. The truck wouldn't start. It had worked perfectly that evening. He tried to get his ladder. It was always kept against the side of the house. It was gone. He ran to his neighbors to call the fire department. The phone lines were dead. He ran to a neighbor's house. They called, but the fire chief didn't come. By 8 a.m., 7 hours later, the fire department finally arrived. The house was completely destroyed, just ash and rubble. The fire chief quickly concluded that the 5 children had died in the fire. He said their bodies were cremated by the intense heat. But George and Jennie knew this was impossible. House fires don't cremate bodies. Cremation requires temperatures of 1400 to 1800 degrees Fahrenheit, sustained for 2 or 3 hours. The Sodder house fire burned at most 1000 degrees for only 45 minutes. Professional funeral directors told George that even in professional crematoriums, bones and teeth always remain. Always. A 45-minute house fire would leave recognizable remains. But when George sifted through the ashes, he found nothing. No bones, no teeth, no metal from belt buckles or shoes. Nothing. The fire chief said he found some internal organs in the rubble and buried them in a box, but he did this without telling the Sodders. When George had the box exhumed and examined by a pathologist, it contained a piece of beef liver, not human organs, beef liver. George also discovered suspicious facts about the fire itself. The fire started in George's office, where the fuse box was located. But the Christmas lights in the house stayed on during the fire. If an electrical fire started at the fuse box, the lights should have gone out immediately. A bus driver reported seeing balls of fire thrown onto the roof of the Sodder house as he drove by around 1 a.m. George and Jennie refused to believe their children were dead. They believed the children had been kidnapped, taken during the fire as a distraction. They hired private investigators. They put up a billboard on Route 16 with photos of the 5 missing children. The billboard stayed up for decades. It read, "Missing since December 24, 1945. If you have any information, please contact the Sodders." Tips came in over the years. Strange sightings, strange stories. In 1947, a woman reported seeing 4 of the Sodder children with 2 Italian-speaking women at a Charleston, West Virginia hotel. In 1949, a woman claimed she served breakfast to a young girl who said her name was Betty Sodder. When the woman asked about her family, men at the table made threatening gestures and the group left quickly. In 1968, Jennie received a letter, no return address, postmarked from Central City, Kentucky. Inside was a photograph of a young man in his 20s. On the back, someone had written, "Louis Sodder, I love brother Frankie, Lil boys, A90132 or 35. Jennie was convinced it was Louis, now grown. The family hired a private investigator to go to Kentucky. He took their money and disappeared. They never heard from him again. For 42 years, George and Jennie Sodder searched for their children. George died in 1969. Jennie died in 1989. They never found answers. The prevailing theory among the family was that the children were kidnapped, possibly as revenge for George's criticism of Mussolini. Some believed the children were taken to Italy or given to other families. Other theories emerged over the years. The mafia theory. George had refused to pay protection money to local mafia members. The kidnapping was punishment. The adoption theory. The children were kidnapped and sold to families who wanted to adopt. The accident theory. The children did die in the fire, but the heat was hot enough to cremate them. However, experts consistently disputed this. In the 1990s, one of the surviving Sodder children tried to have the case reopened, but by then, most potential witnesses were dead. The investigation went nowhere. The 5 Sodder children were never found. No bodies, no graves, no closure. The billboard remained on Route 16 until the 1980s, when the Sodder family finally took it down. Today, the case remains one of America's most haunting unsolved mysteries. 5 children who vanished on Christmas Eve, a fire that didn't burn hot enough, and parents who never stopped searching.